One of the best TV shows of all time, The Sopranos, is finally getting its prequel movie this week in theaters and also on HBO MAX called The Many Saints of Newark. Now that film involves the mafia, gangsters, and all sorts of things like that, so in today's video I'm going to be going over my top 5 favorite gangster movies of all time. Now some of these are my personal favorites, some of them are just classics to many others, and you know, while this is only a top 5 list, many of your favorites might also not be on here, so make sure to leave a comment on what some of your favorites are and which ones you think should have made the list, or in general, which ones are your top 5. Let's have a great discussion down below, and also if you're excited to see The Many Saints of Newark, let me know down below how excited you are to see it. Without further ado, let's dive right in. So at my number 5, it's one of the classics, Scarface, directed by Brian De Palma and also starring the likes of course, Al Pacino, Michelle Pfeiffer, and many more. This is an absolute just classic in general when you look at it from what it's being able to do, from its iconic lines, say hello to my little friend, and even some of the most iconic moments throughout the entire film sphere. This is a movie that when you talk about gangster films, this is absolutely one of the first ones that always pops up in your head. Now I understand, depending on what age you are in or in general where you grew up in, there are multiple different versions of Scarface, and in fact we even have a version of it being remade right now, a new original version, so I'm interested to see where that kind of shapes up to be. But again, Scarface is an all-time classic, and it's one of the best gangster films, and in general just one of the most classic ones from a pure entertaining standpoint that many people always point out to be. And at my number 4, it is Gangs of New York. Now this is one of Martin Scorsese's best movies ever. I love Martin Scorsese. He's my personal favorite director of all time, and yes, I could have easily filled this entire list with tons of Martin Scorsese movies. I told myself I'd only pick 2. This is one of those, and of course, Gangs of New York, 1862. This is the return to the 5 Points area of New York City, seeking revenge against Bill the Butcher, his father's killer. Again, directed by Martin Scorsese. Starring the likes of Leonardo DiCaprio, Cameron Diaz, Daniel Day-Lewis. I mean, who absolutely steals the entire show. A movie that gets better and better on rewatches, and if you're like my dad says this is one of his favorite films all time. The atmosphere, the cinematography, the production design, and just in general, the twists and turns that happen throughout the story. You are completely engaged with its entire runtime, and it is absolutely one of the best movies ever created. And at our number 3, it is The Untouchables, one of Sean Connery's best roles ever, but it also has the likes of Kevin Costner, Robert De Niro, and it's also directed by Brian De Palma. What a coincidence, am I right? He's just a really good director, and like, of course, so is Scorsese. Now, The Untouchables is a little bit different of one. I could have put many different movies in here, but the reason that I did this one is because of the era it is in. Of course, taking place during the probation era, I was actually really interested to take more of an idea of a federal agent taking out and going on to stop like the gangsters like Al Capone and many other corrupted elements. There's not many gangster films out there like that. Well, there is, but this is one of the all-time great ones with fantastic performances all along the way. And at my number 2, this might kill some of you, but absolutely at my number 2 is, actually I'm going to cheat a little bit and put The Godfather 1 and Godfather Part 2. These are absolute classics. I mean, if you've never seen The Godfather, what is wrong with you? I know a lot of you guys might be sitting there and going, well, Zach, why isn't this your all-time number 1? There's one other, gangster film for me that is the most iconic and kind of nostalgic bit for me of growing up and kind of just being obsessed with gangster films and mafia films of all those natures. The Godfather was never one that I actually experienced too much as a kid, besides my grandmother telling me constantly, you need to see this. Of course, directed by Francis Ford Coppola and having the brilliant performance from Marlon Brando, especially just in the first one. The first one still always remains an absolute classic with its memorable lines, its memorable moments, and it's one of the movies that you sit there in awe as you watch and just completely transpire to just the brilliance that was totally put on the screen. And if you've never seen Godfather 1 or 2, you are missing out, and you should definitely make time for it now. Of course, at my number 1 is Martin Scorsese's classic and one of my favorite Scorsese films of all time, Goodfellas. This is just a movie that I have transpired and watched multiple times, and it was one of the first big gangster films I ever watched as a kid, even to the point where I didn't really understand everything. But it's a movie that I consistently go back to rewatch, respire, and really much inspire myself inside the art community when it comes down to filmmaking. One of Martin Scorsese's masterpiece, the story of Henry Hill and his life in the mob, covering his relationship with his wife Karen Hill and his mob partners Jimmy Conway and Tommy DeVito in the Italian-American crime syndicate. Just brilliant. You have performances from Robert De Niro that knock it out of the park, Ray Liotta, who's great, and Joe Pesci, who's just an all-time star. And it's so funny to me because when I see like R-rated films with Joe Pesci, I go back and look at that, and then I go watch Home Alone and I'm like, yeah, I can see it. The performances are first rate, but absolutely, again, Pesci is the giant standout. Martin Scorsese creates he understands these epic gangster stories, and he nails it in every single way, every single time. When it comes down to my number one, it has to be Goodfellas. It's the one that absolutely loved me, but that's where we're going to disagree, and that's why I really want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on which are some of your favorite gangster movies, because I could have honestly gone a lot more modern with some of the stuff that's come out more in the 2000s, and, you know, I could have really much made this whole entire list all Martin Scorsese films if I really wanted to, but I wanted to be fair and actually look on the internet and see what other people thought, what were their nostalgic picks, what are my picks, and kind of mix it all in there. But I do have some honorable mentions to give away before I get going. So in my honorable mentions, we have Widows, which is more of a heist film, but does inspire with some gangster-like. Pulp Fiction is another one. Pretty much, again, name any other Martin Scorsese gang film, and that could have easily been in here. I was really close to putting The Irishman or Casino. Love both those movies to death. The Departed is also one that could have easily been placed in here as well because of all the twists and turns. And No Country for Old Men. Very different in style, but again, one that I could have easily placed in here. Training Day is another one, and Boys in the Hood, you name it. There are so many damn good gangster films, whether it's the mafia, gangs, whatever you want to say it, there's so many fantastic ones. And honestly, I'm hoping the Many Saints of Newark is the same way. My review will either be up by the time this video is up or later in the week, and I hope you guys are excited to watch that, because if you've watched The Sopranos, you understand why this movie is pretty important to the entire atmosphere. But of course, guys, my name is Zach. Thank you so much for watching this. If you guys are interested in seeing movies, head on over to See Sean Films on how to see those early, and of course, it's a big thank you to you and a big thank you to my Patreon supporters, because without you, I wouldn't be able to do this. Again, thank you so much for Warner Brothers and Ally Global Marketing for coming over to me and giving me the idea to, hey, let's talk about this and talk about some gangster movies. Hope this is a great reminder. Hope you guys enjoyed the list. And of course, until next time, stay classy.